Welcome back to Big Up, where today we've got a nice batch of dollar bin digs for us to take a look at. First up, we've got some Blame on 720. Well, it's actually Keepers of the Peace, which is Blame, and the Pledge, which I don't know much about the Pledge. This one's kind of early 2000s proto jump up, but not like fully cheesy jump up. Super high energy, trying to be dance floor tracks. Got some phasey jump up bass sounds. I'm enjoying it. They're pretty good. Not my absolute favorite, but I definitely think if you can get this at a good price, it's well worth picking up. 720 is definitely a label that's worth picking up. It started out very atmospheric, drum and bass, kind of good looking, and kind of morphs. You can find stuff that's kind of hard, a little jump uppy. It's a label that I keep an eye out for. So I would give this a solid like 3 out of 5, which on my record would be I'd definitely pick it up if it's under $4. I think you should too. Next up, we've got Pascal on Frontline. This is it's a 2000 tune, and this one also is kind of, it's like proto modern jump up. You hear those mid basses, kind of those cheesy mid basses, kind of creeping into the sound. And I don't usually think of Pascal as being a jump up artist. I mostly think of him for his like jazzy stuff. But he did a lot of jump up, and you can hear that here. I find this one interesting because it came out in 2000, which is the heyday of like the heavy tech step. That's right in the middle of Stacka and Skynet and Ed Rush and Optical and Tech Itch and Dylan and all these Renegade Hardware stuff that was just like hard stepping and very technical. And this is like outside of what was super popular at that time. I kind of like it, but I can hear what I don't like about modern jump up in it at the same time. I definitely think it's an interesting kind of like capture of the time. I definitely think that the tune of this is the B side or the AA side with MC GQ. It's definitely got some heavy bass in it. I like the use of GQ in it. I'd actually give this a 4 out of 5. I would definitely pick this one up, especially if you want a little something for the dance floor that's a little different. Now we have something we've seen before, at least the label and the artist, Sonic, on Space Records, which Space Records was Sonic's solo label. I've been you can pick up a lot of these for pretty cheap. So I've been hunting them out and would kind of like to pick up the whole catalog. I think I'm about halfway there. Both these tunes are kind of on the dark liquid side, kind of like heavily reesed but very liquid sounding tunes that were around in the mid 2000s. I definitely think Galaxyflip is the tune of this EP, of this plate at least. The B side is The Range, and this one has a nice piano sample, but it does get a little repetitive towards the end. Like the piano sample is real short. So I'd give this one a 3 out of 5. I'd pick it up if the price is right. I would not. This isn't one I'd probably invest full price in, which would be like a 5 out of 5 for me. So if you find this on the cheap, I'd pick it up. Next, we have an artist I'm going to have a hard time saying the name of. Reguez. On Soundtrack. I picked it up because it was the first release on Soundtrack. It was only like $1. And I really like Soundtrack. Big Bud takes over for Soundtrack. This is pre-Big Bud. But this was kind of built off of, once again, when Good Looking kind of fell apart. And there was a bunch of labels that started, like Blue Martin, Soundtrack, 720. Some of them were even labels that were distributed through Good Looking. And I picked this one up because it was on Soundtrack and because I think the art on this is actually really cool. It's pretty modern. Like at this time, this type of art on releases was more kind of like along the lines of this. Real techie, kind of computer graphics, not overly done. I don't know, this has kind of a pop art feel to it. I really think it's pretty cool. Uh, Reguez released some stuff on Good Looking. To me, and this is on the A side is Neutral Pathways, and on the B side's a remix of by Blame of the same tune. To me, the A side sounds not amateurish. It definitely sounds like it is ready to be released on vinyl, but it doesn't sound like this artist has found his sound yet. Like, it still sounds like an early song from an artist. Where he's definitely got the chops, but he hasn't built out his own personality. And unfortunately, he only had maybe 4 or 5 releases. That being said, you can really hear the Blame remix, because the Blame remix kicks it up a notch. It's still an atmospheric drum and bass tune that sounds kind of like Good Looking, but it brings in some heavier bass. It brings in a little more danceability. I like the remix on this one. Once again, I'd pick this up if it was cheap, as this one was. Wouldn't pay full price, so I'm going to give this one a 3 out of 5. And here we see a label that I've featured multiple times already, Function, which is Digital's label. Another label I think I'm kind of on the hunt to be a completionist of. I really like Function. I really like what Digital was doing with Function. He was just releasing music that he thought was good. And it wasn't really trend following or trend setting. A lot of Digital's tunes follow a nice heavy raga influenced Jamaican sound system, and this one's kind of along that lines. This one's by Simon Bassline Smith, and Jungle is the A side, which is remixed by Digital, and the B side's Trouble, and I really found that both these tunes were kind of like steppers. They're real minimal, not a lot of build up, like slowly evolving, like very cool stuff that would never make it on the dance floor, at least today. And it's really interesting because I don't think this would be pressed on vinyl these days. Like, it's not big enough. They're a little too subtle. It's kind of like artist music. I dig the fact that it's on vinyl, but unless you're kind of being a completionist or you're really into Simon Bassline Smith or Digital, I might pass on this one. I dig it. I'm glad it's in my collection. I'm gonna give it a 3 out of 5 because I do enjoy. I like what it is. So, but be aware, this will not be for everyone. And now we have something by Form Recordings. I know almost nothing about this art label, and I know nothing about the artist. I picked it up because it was $1, and I wanted to kind of grab something that I know nothing about and check it out from that time. It comes from Germany. I really was interested because the artist's name is Consequence. Wanted to do some research. There was no recordings of it on Discogs. And it's I was surprised because I liked this Extractor. No, I'm sorry. The Boogietroit by Consequence is a proper 2003 Neurofunk tech step song, which aren't always my favorite, but this one was really, really well produced. It sounds like Stack and Skynet. It sounds like Ed Russian Optical. I could hear this being mixed by Diesel Boy back in the day. I'm sure this was overlooked because it was from Germany. It's by two artists that we've never heard, that were not super big in the England scene, which is a shame because this is pretty good. So I would say this is a 4 out of 5. Go grab it. The B-side, I liked it a little bit less, and it was a bit more experimental, which is another thing I love. It was people putting stuff on wax that was not necessarily something like you're gonna run into every day, which is awesome. It's guys that were outside of England taking a chance, doing something learning how to produce well, doing it right, and then putting it on wax. That's great. That's exactly what I want out of Dollar Bin Beats. This one it even tells you what the sample's from. That's awesome. So yeah, if you find this in a Dollar Bin, snap it up. You'll be surprised by it. Last up, we have on Fuse Recordings, which is an A-Sides label, another Sonic release. This one we have Changes and Cannibal. Both these tunes are pretty good, but they definitely sound dated. I found that kind of to be true of a lot of the stuff on Fuse Recordings, or maybe it's just a preconceived notion of mine. They both are real long, kind of get repetitive. It's definitely like they're DJ tools that were made for a certain time in drum and bass history. I give this one actually a 2 out of 10. I might pass it up again if I saw it. I do like grabbing stuff from Sonic. It gets repetitive. It's got some decent bass. It's got some decent drum work, but by the end of it, it was just entirely forgettable and was wondering when it was going to be done. So this is probably the one out of these 7 releases I'd pass on. But that doesn't mean that it doesn't have merit. So if you dig what I'm doing here, I'd love some feedback. I'd love to hear you guys know what cheap drum and bass records you're into, what cheap records from other genres you're into, what are some labels I should check out that were overlooked that you might be able to pick up on or even artists. Make sure to like and subscribe. Talk to you later.